Can I ask you about, we've talked about it quite a bit, but maybe just zooming out about how OpenClaw works. We talked about different components. I want to ask if there's some interesting stuff we missed. So there's the gateway, there's the chat clients, there's the harness, there's the agentic loop. You said somewhere that everybody should implement an agent loop at some point in
because
their
it's
lives.
like the hello world in AI. And it's actually quite simple.
Yeah.
And it's good to understand that stuff's not magic. You can easily build it yourself. So writing your own little Claude code. I even did this at a conference in Paris for people to like introduce them to AI. I think it's has a fun little practice. And you covered a lot. I think one silly idea I had that turned out to be quite cool is I built this thing with full system access. So it's like, with great power becomes great usability. And I was like, how can I up the stakes a little bit more?
Yeah, right.
And I just made it proactive. So I added a prompt. Initially, it was just a prompt, surprise me. Every like half an hour. Surprise me, And later on, I changed it to be like a little more specific in the definition of surprise. But the fact that I made it proactive and that it knows you and that it cares about you, it's at least it's programmed to that, prompted to do that, and that is a follow on your current session, makes it very interesting because it would just sometimes ask a follow-up question or like, how's your day? I mean, again, it's a little creepy or weird or interesting, but Hypebeat very in the beginning is still today the model doesn't choose to use it a lot.
By the way, we're talking about Heartbeat, as you mentioned, the thing that regularly acts.
You just kick off the loop.
Isn't that just a cron job, man?
Yeah, right. It's like
the criticisms that you get are hilarious.
You can deduce any idea to like a silly. Yeah, it's just a cron job in the end. I have like separate cron jobs.
Isn't love just evolutionary biology manifesting itself in aren't you guys just using each other?
And then, and the project is all just glue of a few different dependencies, and there's nothing original. Why do people? Well, isn't Dropbox just FTP with extra steps?
Yeah.
I found it surprising where I had this. I had a shoulder operation a few months ago, so. And the model rarely used Heartbeat, but then I was in the hospital and it knew that I had the operation and it checked up on me. It's like, are you okay? And it's like, again, apparently like if something significant in the context, that triggered the Heartbeat when it rarely used the Heartbeat. And it does that sometimes for people, and that just makes it a lot more relatable.
Let me look this up on Perplexity, how OpenClaw works, just to see if I'm missing any of the stuff. Local agent runtime, high-level architecture. We haven't talked much about skills, I suppose. Skill hub, the tools in the skill layer, but that's definitely a huge component, and there's a huge growing set of skills.
You know what I love? That half a year ago, like everyone was talking about MCPs.
Yeah.
And I was like, screw MCPs. Every MCP would be better as a CLI. And now this stuff doesn't even have MCP support. I mean, it has with asterisks, but not in the core layer. And nobody's complaining.
Mm-hmm.
So my approach is, if you want to extend the model with more features, you just build a CLI, and the model can call the CLI, probably gets it wrong, calls the help menu, and then on demand loads into the context what it needs to use the CLI. It just needs a sentence to know that the CLI exists if it's something that the model doesn't know by default. And even for a while, I didn't really care about skills, but skills are actually perfect for that because they boil down to a single sentence that explains the skill, and then the model loads the skill and that explains the CLI, and then the model uses the CLI. Some skills are like raw, but most of the time that works.
It's interesting. I'm asking Perplexity MCP versus skills because this kind of requires a hot take that's quite recent. Because your general view is MCPs are dead-ish. So MCPs is a more structured thing. So if you listen to Perplexity here, MCP is what can I reach? So APIs, databases, services, files via protocol. So a structured protocol of how you communicate with a thing. And then skills is more how should I work? Procedures, hostile helper scripts, and prompts, often written in a kind of semi-structured natural language, right? And so technically skills could replace MCP if you have a smart enough model.
I think the main beauty is that models are really good at calling Unix commands. So if you just add another CLI, that's just another Unix command in the end. And MCPs, that has to be added in training. That's not a very natural thing for the model. It requires a very specific syntax. And the biggest thing, it's not composable. So imagine if I have a service that gives me weather data and it gives me the temperature, the average temperature, rain, wind, and all the other stuff. And I get like this huge blob back. As a model, I always have to get the huge blob back. I have to fill my context with that huge blob and then pick what I want. There's no way for the model to naturally filter unless I think about it proactively and add a filtering way into my MCP. But if I would build the same as a CLI and it would give me this huge blob, it could just add a JQ command and filter itself and then only get me what I actually need, or maybe even compose it into a script to like do some calculations with the temperature and only give me the exact output, and you have no context pollution. Again, you can solve that with like sub-agents and more charades, but it's just like workarounds for something that might not be the optimal way. It was good that we had MCPs because it pushed a lot of companies towards building APIs, and now I can like look at an MCP and just make it into a CLI. But this inherent problem that MCPs by default clutter up your context, plus the fact that most MCPs are not made good in general, make it just not a very useful paradigm. There's some exceptions like Playwright, for example, that requires state and is actually useful. That is an acceptable choice.
So Playwright used for browser use, which I think is already in OpenClaw is quite incredible, right?
Yeah.
You can basically do everything, most things you could think of using browser use.